Dear compatriots, we are back on the political crossroads, and today our guest is from Yerevan. Ruben Mehrabyan, who is the deputy director of the Republican Party, is clearly addressing the issue.
Hello, Vice President, Vice President. Yes.
Thank you for the invitation. I greet you and your esteemed audience. Thank you, Mr. Mehrabyan. Perhaps we should start with a statement made by the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia yesterday. Let's talk about what the overall statement was. I found it to be a bit more like a lecture, to be honest. But probably the main call is also related to the constitutional amendments, yes. Also, what about the changes to the national security strategy?
What do you think all of this means regarding this speech and that statement made every day? Yes, those two are fundamentally significant at the national level. Projects, the name was in a broad sense. To be honest, I don't have an explanation for that. He was packaged in this ideological way. In the packaging, let's say, new, but overall it remained quite dry. Yes, those two extremely important projects were the focus around which the state apparatus, the political segments of society as well, they need to work. The Minister of Justice, Mr. Galoyan, was also mentioned. He also gave a speech today, speaking of that little constitution. The project must be absolutely ready before the elections. Of course, this does not mean that at that time, the referendum will take place, and the referendum can only be held either 1 year before the election or 1 year after, 1 year before. Naturally, we won't be able to hold that referendum in time. I will remain 1 year later. That is, what about that? Gagik will be called starting from June 27. And as for the national security strategy, after all, look, Armenia has had two, the second of which is now formally in force. But the first was in 2007, the second. In 2020, what? 19, and I don't even remember. But the whole issue is that they have no connection with the current realities and the time they were created, and they cannot have any. It was more like back in the Soviet times. I feel like I'm in old Van. The services we put in there, whether we use them for a year or not, will be necessary. There is either a logic in that, or it's like being against the house. How can we not have that logic? But in terms of function, they were useless things. I am who I am in life. They did not take the exam and essentially gave nothing to the state. Document this. The light and the taste did not match the name they bear, and therefore also taking into account the strategic turn, which inevitably it's happening for Armenia. It also needs a certain strategic and, let's say, matrix. In the end, we need to understand what step we are taking and for what purpose. That's not just a day's work. You probably saw the message about it, and it's just a list of that department's responsibilities. In education as a whole, the state apparatus is hungry and the work is naturally very extensive. And also, many things will be written, so to speak, in the process, when many things will be overcome and it will become clear that all of this, yes, also fits into that global turbulence in the context that we are facing right now. And some people are in a state of incomprehensible euphoria, and some are also in an incomprehensible state of lament and crying. Neither the first nor the second is correct. Now is the time to work, the time to act, and the time to think clearly. It's about making those judgments in a systematic way, like this. These documents are necessary to bring everything together in order for Armenia to secure its place and ensure its safety, as they say, under the sun.
Mr. Mehrabyan, the important document on strategic relations signed between the United States and Armenia is actually becoming clear that it also took place with the agreement of the new name of Spain. However, we also have the renewed relations between Russia and the United States in motion. Yes, although Nikol Pashinyan also confirms that this happened with the consent of that person, even France, and we also saw the meeting with Javansi, Nikol Pashinyan. That, however, could have changed something considering the new realities.
Yes, we are now witnessing that very serious. Arpi is talking about the ideological debate that is taking place or among allies. Now, we, of course, yes, we can, yes, to have the affinity and aversion are based on our preferences, what is stemming from our values. Item 5. Our understanding of our professed political philosophy is, of course, a personal matter, but in practical politics, we are part of that debate. We are not participants. Essentially, it's verbal in a verbal sense. And what does it have? It doesn't concern us either. It does concern us, but it can also concern us. And in order for it not to affect us negatively, let's say we are required to take a restrained stance, realizing that this is ultimately a conversation and a debate among allies in all cases. And secondly, what has begun, this is the case when this dough will still pull a lot of water. It will take a lot of water, and many, many approaches will still change along the way, even becoming their diametric opposite. Because it's one thing when you yourself, being non-systemic, of course, seeing the defects of the system, you come to change the system from within. That's one thing. It's another thing when you deal with external issues and you confront reality when you see that the perceptions that were formed outside the system, and accordingly let's say this is more about your personal discretion than reality. Yes, these are examinations, and this is a very painful process, and it will continue to be painful. So why all of this came to light at the Munich conference, a conference where Armenia has already presented. That's enough. You are a significant status in the portfolio, political capital, for, I would mention the ground. First of all, that's, of course, it. I'm talking about strategic cooperation. Yes, the one we signed with the United States, and secondly, the agreement with India, which has been reaffirmed and has previous agreements, ministers of defense at the level India and Armenia. Right there in New Delhi, Suren Papikyan was there. And also our Chief of Staff, General Sarian. The third one is the bill was adopted in the first reading, and the second will be in the first days of March, by which, and in the manner stipulated by that law, Armenia adopts a political course that leads to full membership in the European Union. When the fourth one is this whole political thing, Iran's loyal response to the change in course, the whole thing was very interesting, by the way. And yes, if with all this Armenia was already represented there, all this yes of Armenia, let's say book strengthened the meaning, significantly increased relationships with other subjects. And this is very important to record. I also realized that our achievements, now we need to do it intensively. Capitalization is needed because our problems are internal. We have serious systemic issues inside. We have institutional weakness within. We have low quality acceptance mechanisms and low efficiency. We have decisions, low quality and low efficiency of reception mechanisms. All of that, of course, no longer fits. Our problems, our challenges that we must overcome, also do not correspond to the requirements that must be met so that we are able to take advantage of the opportunities that have opened up and the documents that we have signed, which are indicative so that we can implement it on the ground. Otherwise, that paper will remain paper. If we don't bring this to life, and moreover, Yerevan needs to show initiative, which requires very clear institutional capacities. Yes, we have serious issues related to that.
Mr. Mehrabyan, we saw that meetings took place in reality between the Russian and American sides, and there was also an interesting part in the statement regarding important geopolitical interests that they agreed upon for the future. What do you think are the common interests of Russia and the United States, geopolitical interests, and could this also relate to the South Caucasus?
No, that cannot relate to the South Caucasus because the interests of the United States in the South Caucasus they are formulated back in November 23. They were presented with a warm proposal. So it's a set of principles that he introduced related to the Middle Corridor. So the interests of the United States in the South, however, listening to them, they definitely cannot change. It won't happen. As for the agreement with Russia, let's talk about the following. This is a process. The day will either take you somewhere or it won't. That's true. Now, that's one. The second is that the President of the United States is not Donald Trump, the President of the United States. And this makes a very big difference. He has to, because the President works primarily while in office with a directly mandated Congress. Secondly, this so-called establishment, let's say, has 80,000 people working in the State Department alone. And there is an expert community. There are academic research centers in the brain centers, departments, and academic political thought. There is a civil society or interest groups or citizens who are undoubtedly very clear bearers of a value system. I don't think that's what Trump is saying. and receiving those votes in November of last year, the old current steps. Let's say they welcome me there and I can be welcomed. And we see there are even problems within the Republican Party itself, the congressional faction, the Senate faction. It's so cold, yes, facing reality, this administration is sure. Even the electoral base, based on logic, he will draw his own conclusions because we see the United States, it has managed to ruin relations with allies, not to gain new ones. And the prospects for gaining those new ones are very dim. And as for the common world with Russia, it has political interests and can no longer have common interests with Putin's Russia. It simply cannot be a priori. And I think it will come to that realization, which is not the case in Trump's team, but there is no realization. It is enough to simply see that at the meeting you mentioned in Riyadh, at the end of the meeting, the expressions on the faces of the American representatives, which were on one side themselves, and negotiations. A conversation about the days of debt gives an impression on one hand, while on the other hand, it's still caught between the clouds of instructions. When Trump was talking about the infection, he said, make a deal. Where the deal isn't just thrown on the ground for you to pick up and take to the table. Do you see that there are just interests that don't intersect? There are interests that they don't even have any common points of contact and can't have them on different levels. And in general, this was a very bad idea, and I'm sure that the Americans themselves will come to that conclusion. And those who are more persistent will simply be called American. Society and the idiot next to me will force me.
Working in the right direction is the weapon. We may already see a change in that statement. But Mr. Mehrabyan, or see the action, the statement still?
It was a big statement. We'll hear it, won't we? Yes, it's a statement by politicians, not so much about what they want.
Oh, but they are talking about hiding it, right? In fact, what do they want, right? But to celebrate a childish statement. As for Trump Zelensky, I simply do not want to repeat such statements. They are simply unacceptable. How can all this affect politics, the positions of the Ukrainian side? The Europeans have already convened the second extraordinary summit. Now Macron is in a hurry to go to Washington. It's the same according to our perspective. What to expect? What opinions are there about all this?
However, that's what the Europeans want. Quickly and introduce radical corrections into American politics. And for that, yes, first, to form a consensus internally. And second, a consensus has been formed. The European Union has just been left, historically, just left Great Britain what the precondition of marriage. It was more in solidarity with the United States after that text than with many issues of the European Union. And yes, we see a historical turning point in Canada's position. Yes, essentially being the northern neighbor of the United States, but its political and security policy in the vision, yes, it aligns with the European Union. With ideas, moreover, there is also a political consensus in Canada that there will soon be elections And according to all polls, the conservatives will come to power, Trudeau's party. It will not have a majority, but there will be complete solidarity on these issues. Moreover, the guards are even tougher than you can imagine. Forsch here, too, does not expect anything good from the United States and cannot tolerate American society. And as they say, that America could be so unlikable in the free world, this is unimaginable. A group of people can't be a separate current of dreams and imaginations just because of whims. This will be absorbed very quickly. Am I this? Well, by the way, all those who say they are happy that Putin has been exposed, washed, six clean, six not. Look at what the congressmen are saying. Even Republican senators are Republican, where yes, that criminal should be in prison for life, if not executed. This quote. This is what the bomb's allies are saying. Who in Congress is the one funding Congress? Everything Trump would want, would he say, whatever happens, all of that needs to be funded. He is lifting the sanctions, not just from the door. The sanctions are also being lifted by Congress. Congress has always traditionally had a hard time imposing sanctions. For example, the Jackson-Vanik Amendment adopted in the early 70s, the law that imposed sanctions on the Soviet Union for human rights violations never succeeded. Obama transformed it into the Global Magnitsky Act, still maintaining the opposition to Russia's decision to simply change the name to say, oh, that's enough of changing the Jackson Act. I mean, let him not dream. I can't imagine what it would take for the United States Congress to lift this sanction.
Europe has started to think more about its own security. Today, Macron has made a statement that it will become, that is, France will become, and France will be the guarantor of Europe's security. There are four movements about them in the relationship with China on what should we expect in this regard.
Oh, the journalistic investigation into what kind of role China plays in Russia in this palace, the task of fueling the military machinery. These wars that are taking shape, and they are ongoing, yes, they are deeply fueled from China, since they all have a touch on the West. I will win. China, this is our mark. Him, I am just rephrasing that China, everything in the region finds a donkey that is ready to push forward Chinese interests with its own sides. And those donkeys, political donkeys in quotation marks, or military political donkeys, are very diverse. And it's not that China doesn't have direct relations with them. China was simply economically supporting them. So that with gray schemes, and also it is reaping economic benefits by warming its hands on that war. Because according to its logic, both sides in that clash are weak. However, this game can't go on forever. In the end, these communists from China are communists in Africa. It is a term for the human race, which believes in neither God nor the devil in all respects, and his exploits are not the descendants of Confucius. These are the ones who killed sparrows in the 60s. The semi-literate vagrants are the children or grandchildren of those who, as a result, 80 million people died, and 80 million later said that they had miscalculated a bit. The Communist Party, yes, may have made a little mistake and moved on. Here we are. Who are we dealing with here? And we shouldn't be deceived by those achievements, because achievements come only and exclusively through cooperation with the West and Western investments, according to Western markets using. And all this, yes, it can be closed because, like any communist, they have turned all these benefits against the West. So I'll get it. All at once, right? Little by little. Just a little. And it's possible that Donald Trump's policy was specifically focused on containing China. Yes, in that sense, it has quite objective grounds. And it's not like the money was saying something new here. The foundations for this were laid back during Biden's time, and it even started during Obama's time. Trump heated this up during his first term, and Biden came in with an institutional approach. When it comes to the national security of the United States, there is a change in that doctrine. I am Haig. Yes, the United States, as the leader of the free world, yes, must fight against authoritarian countries, against that international threat. That person is a threat to the national security of the United States. This is a quote. Therefore, yes. Oh, the United States. I can repackage these formulations. These interests remain very much objective, and they have their basis in Trump. The formulations, let's say that if we set aside the rhetorical part, the whispering, the dry residue, yes, this is essentially bad. It's a testament to the political legacy of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Mehrabyan. I congratulate you. I will meet you for the lesson.